welcome to our public online debate, which is in my view, very topical issue of reflections of recent elections in Slovakia and Hungary. We would like to look at it from the point of view of rule of law, civic space in Visegrad 4 countries. My name is David Ondráčka, and I'm collaborating with Glopolis, who is like the main organizers and Czech think tank. I used to be anti-corruption guy in Czechia, so you probably, some of you know me, but now I'm collaborating on those issues. Let me first make few housekeeping announcements. The whole debate will be in English, as you can see, because like we're having partners and colleagues from all 4 countries, including Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Poland. That's one thing. Second, the whole debate will be recorded and will be available afterwards on the YouTube channel of program partners. So we're gonna distribute it to you as well. So if you want to send it out, please do so. We plan 90 minutes. Which should be like 60 minutes between our 4 guests and debate, and then questions from the audience. We expect roughly around 40-50 people here on the call, but you are more than invited to actually send questions through the chat, or then in the last part of the debate to ask questions and comment yourself. Right, that's the thing. Little disclaimer, this is not out of the blue, but like the whole debate is a part of a so-called Stronger Roots program, which is funded by EU, by so-called CERV, Citizens Equality, Rights and Values program. And it is implemented together by Czech think tank Glopolis, Open Society Fund Prague, Open Society Foundation Bratislava, and NIOK Foundation in Hungary. Okay, so that's something which I wanted to say at the start. The Stronger Roots program just aims to increase resilience of civil society and its networks, provide financial expert and peer support for selected organizations and networks in those 4 countries. And the purpose is actually to strengthen social capital, embedded them in the communities and societies in which they operate. Okay, and now let's get to the slight background of why we organize such a thing. Well, recently we've seen elections in 2 countries, Slovakia and Poland, and we believe that it's actually good time to provide some reflections on what these elections actually tell us about the whole region and about societies that we live in all 4 countries. What it actually means for civil society and civic space, for even if it's organized or if it's not organized, how it can operate under different and changing environment, under new governments, be it Fico in Slovakia or be it potentially previous opposition in Poland. But of course, also we would like to provide some kind of more insight on whether there are some trends and you know, like some perspectives that actually go beyond seeing results of each elections in our 4 countries, and where we are biting our nails, what will be the results and what it actually will mean for civil society, for rule of law, and for our institutions. So we want to discuss as much in depth what it basically what it means and what consequences might be for rule of law, defining it as a quality of institutions, independence of institutions, some kind of balance of power, freedom of media, whether we can actually avoid some kind of a state capture that is taking place in some countries, and that was actually, or we were on the verge of it. And we would like to take examples from all 4 countries and actually see whether there might be some lessons that we can take from development in each of them. Because the underlying thing, in my view, is basically that we are on the same boat, on very similar boat, let's say. We have similar history, legacy, similar problems, similar last 35 years of dramatic transitions. We are part of EU. We have some EU policies jointly. We have a Visegrad 4 in place. And I believe we have not only joint presence, but potentially joint future. And we should actually discuss what it takes and how can civil society play a role in all this. So the whole reason for that is actually to use those two elections as a kind of a forward for debating mainly all the issues from the perspective of rule of law and civil society, civic space, and see how far we can get. So that's the framework, and that's the umbrella of the debate. As I said, we have 90 minutes, and now I can finally get to our distinguished guests, and I thank them for joining us. Let me introduce them. So let me start by Magda Vašáryová, well-known figure from Slovakia. Hi, Magda. Thank you for joining us. Former politician, diplomat, very experienced public figure from Slovakia. Then we have Klára Votavová from Czech Republic. Hi, Klára. Analyst, researcher who is collaborating with Europeum, Czech think tank, but also Klára is publicist and writing op-eds and comments for different Czech dailies and servers and stuff. So thanks. Next, we have Grzegorz Makowski from Poland, analyst, expert, good governance expert who is working with Bathory Foundation in Warsaw, in Poland, my old friend. So hi, Grzegorz, thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Istvan Kollai from Hungary, academic expert on issues related to rule of law and civil society as well. Now with Marie Curie fellow at Comenius University in Bratislava. So I believe Istvan can provide us also some perspective from both countries, being Hungarian on Hungary, but also staying in Bratislava. So these are four guests that will that will be panelists for the introductory part and for the most of the discussion. But then, of course, as I said, you are all welcome to provide some comments, reflections, send it through the chat, or make it later in the debate and bring it to the table. Okay, so let's jump into that, and let's go directly to some opening round of reflections of what actually happened recently in those elections. So let me start with Magda, if I can. So please tell me, like, what is your reflection on what actually happened very recently and somehow briefly in Slovakia? Fico government actually got today and won vote of confidence, so it's in place. And what do you expect that's going to happen from the angle of rule of law and civil society? Do you think that this pre-election and electoral rhetoric will actually turn into real actions and will be dangerous from this perspective? Please, Magda. Speaker, microphone, mic. Magda, please switch on your mic. There is on the left, down on the left on your screen.
I am trying. Yes, I am. Yes.
Now it's fine. Thank
you. First of all, thank you for inviting me for such a debate, and good afternoon from Bratislava. First of all, I'm able to mention that there were two possibilities to create a government after the election in Slovakia. So there was a scenario of a good, according to me, a good scenario. So government with progressive forces in Slovakia, yes, with Christian Democrats and liberals. And there was a bad or more bad scenario to make government with two so-called social democratic parties. One of them, the original Smer, it means direction. Yes, this is the name of the party of Mr. Fico. And then the voice, Hlas, from Mr. Pellegrini, who was many years a part of the party Smer. Yes, and then because these two parties, so-called social democratic, they didn't have majority enough, so they invited some very curious figures and people from the extreme theater, extreme space. Yes. So that's why they both these Smer as a member of European Socialist Party, and Hlas, who was pretending to be a member in this on this European level. So they were suspended. Yes, they are not.
Magda, can I jump you into that? And do you think, like, now we have the government in place, right? It won vote of confidence today. So Fico is back in the prime minister's position. But do you expect that his radical rhetoric that he made in campaign will be turned into action?
He will. We will see. We will see. He's trying, because you have to see his very fragile position. The majority is only with 3 MPs. Yes. So it means, and among the majority are 9 people who are from the very extreme scene. So he probably, I guess, he probably is trying to make atmosphere, yes, to say the priorities, yes. First of all, no changes, yes. I am here for the fourth time, and you know me, so I am with me is going peace, prosperity, stability, yes. Nothing modern, nothing new. Please be aware that I'm back. Second, we know that he has to make many changes in justice, because many of or not only from his party, but also from Hlas party, they are really under the criminal court. So we will see how it will work later on. So
yeah. So sorry.
Everything is open. Yeah. Yes. So yesterday there was a parliament session. So we will see how it will work.
Yeah.
But they are, as I've mentioned, 2 scenarios. Yes, one not so good and one a little bit better. So we will see.
Understood. We will definitely dwell into more details later, but let's make the first round. So, Grzegorz, can I turn to you now about Polish elections and situation? So, 2 questions at the very start. One, how do you read the situation at the very moment? Like now, like how long it's going to take to actually form the government, and whether it's going to be like Tusk who will eventually form it, and when? And the second, like, do you think it might actually somehow calm down a situation which was very divided and very brutal in a way during the campaign, and it can actually bring some to start closing these divides in society afterwards? So let's start with this, please.
Okay, so simple question. I mean, the situation now is that unfortunately our president, Andrzej Duda, who is still very much connected to law and justice camp, decided last week that Mr. Morawiecki, who is still current prime minister, will, let's say, start a new mission and will attempt to form a new government, for what he doesn't have any chance, because in terms of percentages, law and justice had the highest result in elections, but in terms of mandates in the parliament, they have no chance to form a government, even with the use of, let's say, corruptive techniques like buying MPs, or I don't know, creating some opportunities for the whole parties, because it's almost impossible, because during previous 8 years they became conflicted radically with every other part of the Polish political scene. So it's impossible, 99.99% impossible that they will be able to bring to the former.
So can I jump in? So they are just buying time in your reading, and at the end, when the real government will take, will be in place, basically, where do you expect it?
Well, the most pessimistic scenario is half of December, because this is the result of the constitutional deadlines. So they can buy time till the half of this December. Theoretically, I mean, Mr. Morawiecki can drop this Mission Impossible and withdraw from it, and we may have a new government earlier. Opposition parties declare in public that they are prepared, they can take over, the cabinet is almost ready, but they don't speak officially about the members of the cabinet. But one remark, it's not only buying time from the side of the outgoing ruling majority, it's also about, let's say, embedding their influence in the political systems. What they do, they try to use this time to appoint their ideas to any public institution that is possible to be taken still during this time, and they try to redistribute as much as possible public money to their friends, to their friendly organizations. And this is maybe there will be a chance to speak about the civil society in this context, but this is what they try to do. I mean, to keep as much as possible influence and power, even not being in power in the nearest future.
Super. And in 1 minute, so how do you expect that this division of society might turn out, or it's like there forever and it's unreplaceable? What do you expect? Like very brief reflection.
Very brief. I mean, definitely. I mean, there is much more polarization comparing to what was, let's say, 15 years ago, because this polarization started, in my opinion, from the aircraft catastrophe in Smolensk, when it became really radical. But it's not so radical as it seems to be, in my opinion. But there are places in the public and political life where this polarization is much bigger and will be growing. Of course, the politics is this place, and I can't see any chance to bring people more together in the area of politics. Yes. Because immediately after elections, the leader of Law and Justice, Mr. Kaczyński, started to attacking very radically the opposition that is coming to power. And also, I must say that the polarization will be growing in the civil society organizations community. But this is not the whole civil society. But in the sector, in the non-governmental sector, I predict there will be growing polarization.
Thank you. We'll definitely get to civil society in the next round, but now let's turn to Klára. So please provide 2 questions on you. One, if you have any comments and reflections on Slovakia and Poland, because like you also research it from your institute. So if you have any comments and what lessons it might bring to Czech Republic, and how do you read it? And second, like coming back to Czech Republic and my country as well, do you believe that like we are on the similar path, like rather like Poland or rather like Slovakia? So are we 2 years from Babiš and Okamura, or are we on the relatively stable path? How do you read this now?
Yeah, thank you. I would say that this development in Central Europe has been there for maybe, I don't know, since 2015. And maybe not only in Central Europe, that we always feel that we have to save democracy. And then sometimes some countries manage to save democracy for more years, and then they don't. the next time, which, you know, like my reading is that in Slovakia, they kind of had this chance to save democracy after Jan Kuciak was murdered, and they got the president Čaputová and the previous government in Slovakia, while in Poland they got this chance to save democracy now. And in the Czech Republic, of course, this was 2 years ago, when the current right-wing government came to power in this, like, I would say, very triumphalist mode of saying, we are here to save the democracy from Babiš. We are going to return the Czech Republic back to the West, and stuff like that. And that was the promise. And I do not want to like downgrade the risks that were coming from Babiš before 2020, and that may come after 2021 and may come after 25. But what I think is quite worrying in the Czech Republic currently is that I don't see the government to act in a humble way at all. That is, like, when they won in 21, that was one of my commentaries that I wrote for the media, was that, like, okay, now you need to be humble because there were maybe 3 million people that didn't vote for you, whose also votes were lost. Many of them were lost below the threshold. And you need to be sure to, you know, work on the social cohesion also in terms of really like social justice, in terms of like the well-being of people. But the problem is that the Czech Republic economically is now maybe the weak man of Europe, as we are currently dubbed by also foreign press. And the government, the only thing it's trying to do is like slicing the expenses while not really speaking about the revenues. And the government is also coupling this with a very securitized discourse, which, you know, is emerging from both the Ukrainian war and the Israeli war, which are both very sensitive for the Czech population. But this means that like a lot of criticism that could happen, you know, vis-a-vis the government is framed as it's like is an attack by our enemies, and this is therefore that we shouldn't take care of them. Sorry, we shouldn't reflect this criticism. Yeah. And I think this is like the problem, which, you know, like if you want to save the democracy and like get out of this vicious circle of like the 4 years, then you need to foster some kind of societal cohesion, and the government is not doing that. And therefore, to answer your question, I'm quite afraid that we are going to return to Babiš and Okamura in 2 years again, and everybody's going to be so surprised. And it's like my one wish for Poland in this situation would be that the government is humble and it doesn't do the same thing that the Czech government is doing.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll definitely dwell into more details in the next rounds, and thank you for your initial remarks. So let me now turn also to Istvan. Well, your reflections also, like how did you see Slovak elections being in Bratislava? What do you think? And the second thing, also, like from your Hungarian perspective, like, do you look at the neighboring countries with some kind of envy that, like, okay, you have issues, but still the rule of law is relatively in place and institutions work? Or do you see that like with some kind of sardic smile that we will get to, you'll get to our path and our shoes very soon? So what's your view, Istvan, please?
Yeah, it's a good question. What is the echo and what is the message of these Visegrad elections to the Hungarian public discourse? What I can summarize that the government and the pro-government, how to say, circles who insist on supporting this direction which leads on the verge of the EU, are a bit disappointed, to tell the truth, because they expected Polish-Hungarian strong alliance with peace, and a Polish-Hungarian alliance within the EU could be very, very well framed in the Hungarian public discourse, having its own historical roots and so on. So it could have been framed well and narrated. The Slovak-Hungarian not so well. So because we could say that peace was replaced by Fico as a kind of possible ally within the Visegrad countries, Visegrad region. But Fico has a very bad reputation among Hungarians in Hungary, because Hungarians recall of his anti-Hungarian earlier life, we could say, and the other is that it's very seeming how a special weird coalition was born in Slovakia with this SNS and with the very special guys within the SNS club in the parliament. And it has a very strong media echo in Hungary. What was very interesting is that on the day of elections, not one Hungarian broadcasting and media and podcast editorials moved to Bratislava, having a live, how to say, broadcast about the election night. So it was a really #1 issue in the Hungarian media at these days. But anyway, what can we say? That such a plan that Central Europe could have been framed as a kind of counterbalance against Western Europe, led by Orban against Western European, I don't know, interests, cannot work in the future. So now, rather China, India, I don't know, these kind of global actors are narrated as a kind of possible allies. And there is now a strong debate whether Hungary is isolated or not. Because this kind of isolation within the EU is very, I don't know, apparent. It's not a question of debate, but these pro-governmental circles say that it's just seemingly a problem because we have allies out of the EU and so on. I don't want to go in detail in this direction, but if you need, I can go. But what is also interesting is that how Czechs became a kind of, and the Czech coalition government became a kind of subject of laugh and mocking in the speech of Orban, which was not typical, to tell the truth, because he wanted to preserve a kind of Central European, how to say, not comradeship or some kind of, fellowship, or how to say, not hurting each other emotionally. And in recent speeches, I was hit by these small mocking items or sentences about the Czechs. Yes, Czechs are always, the Czechs always let us down, and so like Hasids, I don't know, some kind of old, this historical example is very, very strong and vivid in the Hungarian discourse. Czechs are not the country and nation which we can rely on. And what I think is very clear on the side of opposition, that it's not enough just to speak about Orban. It is the problem. That is the problem, because it is already very clear that coalition, a kind of ability for coalition, can be a very good tool for politics. And in Hungary, there is no tradition in this kind of modernist traditionalism coalition making. So these Christian Democrats, liberals have so strong cultural cleavages that it should be a kind of work to build a kind of trust among each other, because it is not heritage from the past.
Super, thank you for all this introductory round. And let me just move a debate slightly towards this rule of law things, this balance of power, quality of institutions, independence of media, independence of different institutions among themselves. I would like to ask questions to all four of you, and it depends on in which sequence we go. How easy it is actually to dismantle the rule of law, and whether those autocrats that we are having in our region, they also learn those lessons from each other, right? So they are not static. They some of them come to see Orban and learn lessons how to actually, what steps need to be taken to actually dismantle the rule of law. And on the other hand, how difficult it is in your reading to actually build it back and start to build it back when there is opportunity. So how easy it is to dismantle rule of law, or whether the institutions are actually strong enough and robust enough to survive political pressure from current government. Like, anyone who would like to please make me some signs who would like to start? Okay, so Grzegorz, and then Magda, if you want to have remarks, please. Okay, so Grzegorz, please.
Right, so stop me if I'm talking too long.
I will.
I mean, very simple and brief answer is it's very easy. I mean, correct me, Istvan, if I am wrong, but comparing to Hungary, at least in Hungary, I don't like it. I don't like it, of course, but in Hungary, Orban at least had a constitutional majority to do what he did. But
Yes.
in Poland, the situation was that in 2015, Law and Justice won elections without the constitutional majority. They only had an absolute majority, but they didn't care about it. I mean, they simply, if they wanted to take over some institution, the Constitutional Court, Supreme Court, National Supreme Audit Office, etc., I mean, they simply didn't care about what is in the Constitution. I mean, they simply were adopting the laws that were against the Constitution, starting from the Constitutional Court. That was the important thing. I mean, to take over the Constitutional Court, to place their people in the Constitutional Court, the people that then would accept and legitimize everything else. So that was the crucial point. And I think that the most important thing now is to take back the Constitutional Court and to revert, this process. But starting from the Constitutional Court, it went really pretty easy. I mean, to take over other constitutional institutions. And it was like taking the scheme from the, let's say, handbooks about the Third Reich. I mean, all the steps that were described about the Third Reich, how it became to be about the Weimar Republic, basically, it was there. I mean, taking the Constitutional Court, taking judiciary, prosecution, other most important constitutional bodies, and that's it. So it was very easy. It took them 2 years, I mean, to take everything most important. The only institution that survived actually was the Ombudsman office, where they couldn't simply gather the majority. But it went really quickly.
And Grzegorz, can I just little remark? So now when there will be attempt to either take back the Constitutional Court and bring there some more independent experts, but also like to change things at the public broadcasters and others, it's all sometimes in Poland requires also changing of legislation, and sometimes also with constitutional majority, which new government won't have, right? So it will be quite difficult to do it. Or how do you expect this?
I mean, it's not even about the constitutional majority. It's about the majority that could reverse the president's veto. Because many of these changes that happened, the changes that actually were legalizing illegal institutions, which is what is paradox. I mean, legalizing the lack of rule of law, are now in place. So to revert it in a constitutional way, we would have to adopt new laws, but these new laws will be vetoed by the President Duda, what he already announced during the opening of the first session of the parliament. So Duda will remain in the office for the next year and a half, but who will be the next president? It's still very unclear. So it might take time if the new government, if the new majority would like to follow the rule of law, then they would have to wait probably more than this 1 year and a half to have the situation which allow them, to revert all these bad changes that happened.
Thank you. So please now, Magda, the same question, like how easy is to dismantle the thing from your observations and experience, and please.
when we see the very complicated situation in Poland, so in Slovakia, we are much more simple, I would say. But frankly speaking, our institutions, so it means Constitutional Court, Grzegorz spoken about it, highest court, and also public medias and many private medias. So in Slovakia, there will be not such a simple example, so Hungarian or Orban's example, how to privatize the state. So, but we will see, practically we will observe if these democratic institutions will survive Fico's attacks. First of all, we have our Mr. President. Yes, this is the different role, like the President Duda in Poland. So she is still and will be till the end of June as such a strong woman, strong woman on the top. The problem is who will be the next president. So we are going after the new year in the new campaign, the presidential campaign. So we will see. We have until now two strong candidates. One is Mr. Pellegrini, who will run away from the coalition, I would say, frankly. And if he will be away from as a head of his own party, so I'm aware that the rest of the party will be a part of Mr. Fico's smer. Yes, so this is a problem. If the second strong candidate, Mr. Korczok, who is the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, former colleague of mine in various ambassador posts, and so will be a president. So the situation will be the same like today. So Fico against Mrs. President, yes. So Fico against Mr. Korczok. So there will be practically a huge fight, we've survived these fights, Mečiar against President Kovač, and so on and so on. In this respect, I have to say that we have many experiences, and what is a difference from Hungary, for example, we are used to have all the time only coalitions as a government, yes, coalition governments. So there is all the time, it's not such a stable, and Mr. Fico is going to make everything what is possible. So we will see, but but we will speak about the civil society later.
We will.
Yes, yes, good.
Yes.
So I will stop by this.
Thank you, Magda. Perfect. And Klára, same questions to you. Like, what's your reaction? How do you see that? How do you see it from the Czech perspective? But also, like, you can also comment, of course, on Hungarian, Polish, like on the dismantling of rule of law, checks and balances, and different mechanisms that should actually prevent that the state is captured. Please.
Thank you. As you know, if in our Europeum analysis revive, we made this rule of law comparison for policies and discourse. And actually, of course, one of the most evident thing is that in Czechia, it hasn't been that problematic so far as it has been in especially Poland, Hungary, but now even Slovakia. Most of the discussions about the rule of law in Czechia have concerned corruption, and the conflict of interest of the former Prime Minister Andrej Babiš. Of course, that was, I believe, a problem because you then, had ministries actually arguing, for instance, in front of the European Commission in favor of not just Babiš, but, like his company. So that, of course, is something that shouldn't happen. At the same time, I must say that I kind of like to problematize this like clear-cut, like Babiš was the evil and now we have this new government and everything is shiny, because it's unfortunately not. And what I see now is like a lot of fears of politicization, for instance, of research institutions, because we have some reforms regarding their financing, but also how, for instance, these ministries are going to appoint directors of research institutions that are somehow like subjugated to them. This could, for instance, include the Institute for International Affairs under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I have friends who are working there who are afraid that, maybe some opinions maybe not that welcome there, or there was this entire topic of the Institute for the Study of Totalitarian Regimes, where like a lot of people kind of had to leave because they didn't, well, as I understand it, the government wasn't very happy with their topic of studies of the communist system, which it doesn't like to be studied in any other way than the totalitarian crimes. And that is something that I think, one other thing that I will mention is, of course, that like when the new government came, they kind of wanted to get rid of the Babiš people. So there is this entire like debabišizace process going on. But in my experience, and I have actually worked at a public service in the past as well, they were actually often good people that didn't really have so much to do with Babiš or nothing to do with Babiš, but they were seen as somebody working for him. So this is also something that can happen when, you have these changes of power, maybe now in Poland, that I see a lot of tribalism, which is not necessary in the public service. And like to finish this up, I think that the problem is that like when you have instances like this in the research institutions or in the ministries, and Babiš comes back, what are you going to do when he does the same? Like when he does something that is even worse, for instance, that is we are going to like even less, but he's going to say, okay, they did it too. So I think that this is something that I see as a huge problem, and unfortunately, I think it could get worse. It's already not so good under the current government, and it could get worse under Babiš. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Understood, and I definitely took this, trying to avoid this black and white picture, which is very often taken, and is kind of also like messianism or triumphalism, where that we are saving democracy, we are on the bright side of the history, and then there was a black side. And I'm telling it from the perspective of the guy who was fighting Babiš and his conflict of interest and misuse of power myself. But like, and I turned my hair gray because of that. But like, let me also turn one more to Istvan. If you can comment on your perspective from Hungary, like, can actually Hungary speak at this moment internally about the rule of law, or it's something which is so distorted and so rigged and so captured that it cannot even be called so? Well, because like what I'm talking about is like we, for the first time in a long history, we saw that EU actually started this conditionality mechanism and froze some parts of EU funds to Hungary because of the breaches of rule of law practice. And now there is this quite and very hot political debate whether these funds will be unfrozen and whether the some reforms which are taking place in Hungary, they are for real or not. So how do you read this thing, and how would you comment on that, please, Istvan?
Very, very hard question, to tell the truth, because yes, all of those, or many of those, how to say, dimensions of rule of law, like election, law on election, or media law, and so on, was changed in such a way which helped the majority to remain its majority. We could say somehow that, but as the Polish commentator before me commented in a very righteous way, it has a parliamentary 2/3 majority to do it. So it's very hard to speak about it in that way. That what can we say, that it's against the atmosphere and the air of rule of law, air of this the spirit of the, I to say, Montesquieuian principles. But I could maybe stress that everything is, how to say, laid down on paper, so not against law, but what is very clear and honestly emphasized and represented by Orban and his very close circle, that they are against institutions. They don't rely on institutions to realize the law, but personal relations. It was, how to say, the cleavage, how the Hungarian conservatism had been shattered. Along this cleavage, people who would wanted to insist on the importance of institutions, and other who insist on the importance of, how to say, some kind of tribalism or some kind of personal solidarity within this cultural circle. But for instance, if there is a kind of or kind of again a case submitted to the police against an entrepreneur having a very clear corruption issue, it is, for instance, denied by the police. They don't want to. Yes. So, is it a rule of law? Yes, according to my definition, yes. But I think that it's not a good direction if we would like to catch the how to say, the most problematic point in that way, because everything is on paper, there is a 2/3 majority, and so on, and institutions are already porous. They are full of people. Everybody knows that this chief police officer belongs to this minister, I have to say, and they won't make a step against him. And it's not about law, it's about tribalism. It's my word about it. It's a kind of tribalism.
Very interesting. And can I just like briefly jump in and say, like, so what do you expect, like, from this EU pressure and EU money? Like, does it have a chance to actually force Orban's regime actually to make some concessions, or something which would go into along these lines, or not? Because he wants the money, right?
Yeah, two-edged sword. It's a two-edged sword. It's a two-edged sword, because Hungarian society became, at least for me, surprisingly resistant against these EU accusations, saying, and they can accept this governmental, how to say, narrative that these are a kind of conspiracy against us, and not they are not thinking of that maybe there are some I don't know, truth in it. Or I always commented, for instance, the media, that it's not the Brussels against Hungarian, but the Lithuanian, the Portuguese, the Greek Minister of Finances don't want to finance our system. There is some problem with us in Riga, in Athens and Porto. I'm not happy a bit about it, but as far as I see, there isn't a strong, how to say, stirred up atmosphere or public discourse around it. So it's a two-edged sword. And if the EU, and it's my problem, that if the EU won't be very, very consequent in it, and I'm afraid that they will give up the principle according to which they didn't give the money, if they won't be consistent, the whole narrative will be that, okay, it was just a kind of pretext. It was a typical, I had to say, bureaucratic obstacle somewhere in the West, and we solved it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I think your message was very clear. Magda, I will give you now word, but let me move a debate slightly towards civil society and what are the risks and opportunities under this new governments and changing environment. So whether it might thrive, whether it might operate, whether, and let me start with Magda. Like, do you believe that civil society, organized or not organized, and the civic space will be under direct threat under Fico, and NGOs will be called foreign agents, and there will be cutting in funding, and everything will be more difficult? How do you see it?
So, first of all, I would say that the European Commission, according to me, will be much stronger to Fico than it was against the Orban for 10 years. Yes, because Slovakia didn't have such a supporter like Orban has have had in Germany, for example, or especially in Bavaria and in Austria too. So the European Commission will be much stronger and quicker toward some bad steps from the Fico government. But Slovakia, thanks to Mr. Mečiar in the 90s, we have a very strong civil society. So also during this campaign, we worked, because I am back to in my activist position. So I am able to say that the civil society in Slovakia is really very strong, very strong, and we will work hard now with this government. I am sure, of course, Fico have said once that he wants to let pass through parliament the law that all the NGOs who has money from abroad, they are, as you've mentioned, of foreign agents. Yes. But then it was very funny situation, because all the NGOs of our Catholic Church, they have also much money from abroad. So they are trying to say that they will only want to eliminate NGOs. They are politically active or something. So because there are 36,000 NGOs in Slovakia, so it's really hard job to say who is good, who is bad, and so on and so on. So we will see if the so-called third sector, yes, in Slovakia will be united and solidar, and if yes, then there will be a tough job for Fico.
Thank you for your comment. Grzegorz, can you also comment on civil society from Polish perspective, and also, like, because of the all this mobilization before during campaign and in last years, all these protests that actually helped to mobilize people to stand up against peace government and actually to bring about the change as well. And how do you see it? Like, also, if I may add one thing, like, some of the opposite NGO sector was probably pictured by PiS as an opposition force before, no? And it was like that it collaborated with the opposition. Now, when the government will change eventually, will it be difficult for those NGOs to keep their independence, to keep certain also critical look at the governing power, and to potentially be also watchdog still in some areas and policies?
Okay, I mean, it's a very difficult topic, I think, but let me structure this like this. I mean, starting from the civil society, let's say in general, I mean, as a community of all citizens, let's say. So in this meaning, I must say that the general picture of civil society, in my view, is ambivalent. I am not so optimistic like some other my colleagues who say that actually it is civil society that won elections. In some sense, yes, because we had these two big mass protests during the electoral campaign. And it really had impact on the turnout, on the support to the opposition, and so on. But when I look back into these 8 years, of course, there were many groups, there were many organizations that were very active in defending rule of law, in doing watchdog job, and so on. But I think it was very, let's say, it was very dynamic. There were long periods of inactivity, of low activity. There were some moments of big mobilization, protests, and so on, but they were never, in my opinion, as big as, for example, protests in which you were involved in Czechia. I mean, against Babiš. Many times I was giving example of protests against Babiš, comparing to what was happening in Poland. After there were many protests in defense of judiciary, but comparing the scale of it and and the size of society, I would expect much more mobilization that I witnessed. Another example, I think. I am impressed by the Israeli civil society, how much they were involved in protecting judiciary and the rule of law there. So, of course, in the end of the day, I mean, the result is positive because we had enormous mobilization in elections. We had the highest turnout in the history since 1989. If I may show you I can't show you a slide, but I had one picture. The thing is that the result of it is that those who won elections, I mean, the still opposition, has the strongest civil society's mandate ever since 1989, because almost 40% of voters voted for opposition parties that will take over the rule in the coming weeks or month. So in this general sense, yes, I mean, the civil society contributed a lot to this change, but taking in account this all 8 years, I think this picture is ambivalent, and I am not sure if this mobilization will survive for next years, and if it will make possible to win elections only this factor in 4 years or maybe in 2 years, if this new government won't survive. It will be even much more difficult if they will go this Israeli path like before Netanyahu came back. So this gonna be a challenge. And another thing I would like, and this will be very short, and another piece of this picture, I think, is the non-governmental sector, which got very much polarized by money. Because this law and justice government that was ruling for the last 8 years, I mean, they did it in a very different way when they were first time in power between 2005 and 2007, when they were neglecting non-governmental organizations as important actors of political and social life and public life. Now they put a lot of money to build their own, let's say, non-governmental sector. They fueled with money new organizations. There are many examples of organizations that received millions of zlotys, totally new organizations, only just to establish, their offices, to run activity, to support the ruling party. And what we have now in practice, in reality, we have this, let's say, old civil society that was developing in a long run since 1989 to now, let's say more liberal. We have new non-governmental organizations, big group that developed since 2015. And they are fed with money from government, with public money. And we have, above all of it, a lot of clientelism. Because what happened during last 8 years was the huge influx of public money going to the non-governmental organizations for services, for public activity, mostly for organizations supporting government. And for these 8 years, many organizations got used to use of this public money. And I think that there is a lot of clientelism in all of this. And I think that this is really threat for the non-governmental sector and civil society as a whole, because it undermines, I think, the trust to this important part of the civil society. And I don't know how to get rid of this clientelism without having a good democratic culture in the civil society, what is again paradoxical.
Wow, that was very impressive, analysis, Grzegorz, and it actually shows how complex those last 8 years were, even towards civil society in itself. This potential buying of influence by providing some public funds and actually getting used to it is actually quite severe. Okay, so Klára, please, can you comment on this part from your perspective, and how do you see, let's say, also like Czech context from these protests against oligarch and autocrat to relatively, or to finding some balanced view towards governing power, on one hand collaborate and participate, on the other hand staying in a critical mode and taking stands when government does not deliver. How do you, please?
Yeah, thank you. I was actually quite surprised about what Grzegorz said, that these protests of Milion Chvilek za demokracii were bigger and inspirational for Poland. That is something that they would surely like to hear. And I think it's a good message to see that, this kind of mobilization can occur when there are dangers, and if there would be dangers to the independence of the justice system and so on. At the same time, then the question is like, what happens after we got rid of the oligarch, and they became kind of, I don't want to say useless, but it's evident that they kind of lost their edge, because their position before the elections was like to get rid of Babiš and just like vote for the other parties, which are right-wing parties, and then I think they couldn't really agree on anything else besides that. Other than that, I believe that the environment in Czechia vis-a-vis NGOs has been quite hostile for a really long time, maybe at least since 2015. And this is something that we can still see across the board. So, Babiš thinks that ODS, which is the main opposition, the current government party, but the opposition to Babiš also thinks that, especially if you have a look at their stances on gender issues, LGBT, environmental protests, etc. That is, I think, quite universally seen in the Czech Republic as something that is harmful and that is bringing in these left-wing experiments from the EU, and that's something that we should fight against. And really, I think that there is a consensus in the society on this, which I think is a problem, because of course, going forward, it's not a very good environment. One other thing I would like to point out is something that a Hungarian political analyst called Ester Kovács says, that with the money comes the social theory. And I think this is something that tends to be a problem for Central European NGOs, is that they are very often dependent, and we are all dependent on these Western European money, but that these the social theory which can and the requirements of the grants are very often adjusted to the Western European context, and maybe not so much taking into account our context. And I must, so then people would go focus on, I would have to think about an example. She has very good ones, but I think it can be quite triggering to people when they see that the NGOs are only focusing on some EU imported problems and not something that is derived from the local society and its needs. And I think it's something that we should focus on as NGOs. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, if any of our panelists have a reaction on that, but I would also call on audience, if you have any comment or questions, please bring them on the table. There is a chat. You either can actually let us know that you want to say something, or just like raise there's also a hand, right? Which you can raise, and I can see that someone wants to bring a question. So it's open if anyone wants to react. But Istvan, you wanted also comment on civil society and or not?
Yes, yes, because this story of civil society and the crisis of civil society maybe didn't start 2010, but well before. So I can compare the Hungarian civil society with the Slovak and the Czech one a bit better, not the Polish. To tell the truth, I don't know Polish so well. And what I always saw that the Hungarian civil society has its own ideological fortresses, or how to say. So it could have been a kind of platform of inter-ideological dialogue, or some kind of natural interference and coexistence and intermingle of different people. And for instance, when I wrote an article to a half academic, half public paper, other editorial became angry. Why there? And it was a kind of ideological cleavage. So too many even personal conflicts were ideologized, or how to say, because in any world there are personal conflicts within people, but this ideological content became so poisoning. And before 2010, there was some kind of balance between silliness, I could say, and we lost it afterward. But I don't want to blame the whole story. I don't want to relativize those people's responsibility who made the law. And unfortunately, I have to say a bit self-critical way that this Hungarian, those very broad Hungarian circle of intelligentsia who was upset and against of those neoliberal reforms, which was represented by Gyurcsány, was not aware enough of defending these autonomous circles. It's already past, it's already over. And now this civil society is hacked, to tell the truth. So there are such civil organizations which, for instance, have very strong private money from companies, but these companies are fed by state funds. So it's practically public funded civil organizations, not civil organizations, to tell the truth. But on paper, yes. So it's very hard to grab everybody see the problem, but it's very hard to do something against it. And the other problem is, if I can stay a bit lengthy, which I see that people are already demotivated to speak, to be active, because there are already so many, how to say, the retards, this kind of on this hazard, those people on this domain that which can, I don't know, a bit set people away from this territory. Even there is a contra selection process.
No, understood, and very good observations. Let me just stay a bit more around civil society in one more round, because why we bring it on is, of course, one, because I think it is simply backbone of society, and it matters, and it might be under attack. But we also try to think that perhaps there might be some more regional answer, right? From civil society, that it's not only that we don't live in our own silos and do our own little policy thing here and there, and we don't care about what's going on in the whole society, because that's what we very often see, that there are perfect NGOs, very professional, very devoted, very, very efficient in in doing their work. But sometimes we need more joint effort and perhaps even some regional answers if there are things. And second thing, as Magda mentioned, you know, those governments that try to delegitimize NGOs, they usually call them political NGOs, right? And try to actually, and that's why they come up with these foreign agents labels and other stuff and try to cut funding. So, but like but most of NGOs, which are not necessarily providing only services, are political by its nature, right? Because they try to get into public debates and at least communicate with political figures and then public service. So I would like to see your views on how to avoid this trap of being divide NGOs into political ones and apolitical ones, and try to actually show that they keep some unity as well. Please, any of you, if you want to comment. Was it or was I too complicated with the question this time?
There is a
Grzegorz,
hand.
please. There is a hand. Okay, so Petr Lebeda, so please switch on the mic. On the left
first,
side.
yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking part in our debate. I'm Petr Lebeda from Glopolis. So just that David can have a glass of water, I will actually try to pick up on the question that he raised in somewhat different context. My question to all of you is actually whether, and in all of our countries, it's second or even third round of elections where we were fighting quite heavy extremism and populism. So my question is whether active civil society, and especially this type of civil society, which is labeled often political NGOs, whether we have taken some lessons from that, and whether we have taken some changes in our approach to politicians, to public debate, and to society at large. And the particular question is, do we actually know how to react in situations where the opinions are polarized over long term, and we know that we cannot get rid of this kind of opinion, you know, anti-LGBT, anti-minority, anti-gender, anti-environmental approaches, whatever. We have to live with them somehow. We have to debate. We have to make them part of the democratic discussion as far as it's possible, because sometimes it's not possible. So have you taken the lessons? Do you feel in your countries that there is such a recognition, and that at least part of the civil society is not just, you know, this one-way direct advocate of certain particular political views, but is actually trying to expand, to facilitate, to negotiate some broader consensus, look for more sophisticated common denominators to collective action, so that we actually keep the democracy core alive also in the long term?
Thank you. Any reactions? So I see Magda wanted, please Magda, and then Grzegorz, if you also, Magda, please.
We have many experiences how to avoid again the situation that the extremists will have seats in our parliament. Yes, they were there, neo-fascist. Now Mr. Fico didn't have enough voters, so he grabbed for these kind of voters. So it's not anymore such a possibility to have a social democratic party, Mr. Fico's, but there is a really extreme right party, I would say, with some social programs. Problem is, and this is new in this debate, that we are under the huge pressure of the Russian propaganda. And they are focused on such a kind of voters. These voters, they are ready to hear this propaganda and being more and more extremic and extremic. That was the anti-vaxxer propaganda. There was anti-chemtrails propaganda, and so on and so on. Anti-Ukraine propaganda, and also with anti-Semitism propaganda. So this is according to me the highest problem, how to fight or how to deal also from the NGOs against these influence of the heavy Russia propaganda.
Understood. Any other comments? Grzegorz, please.
Okay, so I think the lesson for answering a little bit to the question that was asked. I mean, the lesson from Poland is that you can avoid politics even for years, but at some point politics will touch you, attack you, grab you. Anyway, because the thing is that I think from the point of view, especially of the non-governmental sector in Poland, we are in a new situation, because for years after 1989, civil society organizations tried to avoid politics. They tried to avoid, they tried to do policy. They tried to be service providers. They tried to work for, let's say, human rights. But when you have a party in power that is so much ideologized, that is so radical in terms of nationalism, in terms of religion and so on, then any type of activity that you may think about, that you may think this is distance, that is only service providers, becomes also ideological and politicized. So I think what we have to learn in next years, that as civil society organizations, I think that we have to learn to be engaged also in politics, because I think this keeping a distance to politics is impossible, even in a simple service providing, like being an operator of the helpline for the people who suffer from domestic violence, because even this can be politicized.
No, that's a very good point, and I think simply every activism or every civil society involvement is political by itself, but it's not necessarily in any sense wrong. Istvan, you raise your hand, please react.
Yes, because I also would like to add one topic, and which could be a kind of factor of why this extremism on the increase and anti-democratic atmospheres increase. Maybe it's already too broad domain if I add this topic, but I think this technological development, which economists like to engage in this issue, and technological development made our knowledge about each other and about the outer world very porous. And it's a relatively new problem, because earlier engineers, technicians, IT experts could rely on each other, and doctors and medical experts could rely on each other's knowledge. And now the world became too specialized: nanotechnology, biotechnology, GMO food, climate change, vaccination. Even how many doctors I know who don't believe in climate change, and I know biologists who don't believe in economics, saying just financial bankers just have a kind of conspiracy among them. So, and I think this SNS in Slovakia became a very, very interesting, special, I had to say, phenomenon on this field, because from some point of view, it's an innovative phenomenon, because it's not nationalists, it's already against everything, against this kind of technological chaos, chemtrail, and so on, climate change, seeing some kind of conspiracy behind every kind of technological or scientific narrative. So, and that's my bit maybe pessimistic conclusion, that I think it needs time. So maybe it's very hard to solve, as like in the 30s, in the last decade, in the previous decade, when Europe had to wait for the end of the anti-democratic sentiment, which was not just in Germany, but in other countries, in Italy, but even in France and so on, Central Europe. And we had to, like an illness, you have to just lie in the bed. So I don't know.
No, thank you. We are approaching the end of the debate because like we definitely said 90 minutes. So if there is any other questions from the audience, so please do so now, because like or raise hand or send it to the chat. I see Grzegorz also sent to the chat some table showing the voters behavior, right? If I read it quickly, right? So have a look if you want. And but if I don't see any, so let me give word to Klára and to her reaction if you want, please.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to strongly agree with what Grzegorz and you said about, not really any activity in the public sphere not being political, even though like I met like a representative of associations of NGOs in Czechia recently, and she said like, we want to convince the politicians that we are not political. But I don't think that's a good approach. But what I think this ties to is that like we have forgotten how to be political and disagree with each other without seeing enemies in each other. Like if there is an NGO and it is advocating for something that I don't believe in, then it's not seen by the politicians or by its concurrents as something like that is part of the political debate, but as very often as a threat. And of course, like I understand this is problematic when some of these civil societies may actually pose a threat. Like we can speak about the uncivil society and like the ones, for instance, what to do with the civil society bringing in like very conservative clerical opinions, for instance. But generally, I think that we should be able to speak together without seeing each other as a threat. And I would like to return to this, like I think I said at the beginning, like the securitization that I see in the Czech Republic is worrying to me. The securitization of discourse that has started, and it's very understandable, with the war in Ukraine, which is very easy to say, in these like black and white colors, especially in the Czech Republic. And now, like when you are criticizing our society, when you are criticizing our government, you are actually an enemy. Now I can also see it in the case of like the Israeli war, which is much more complicated. So it's even more ridiculous to try to make these kind of black and white. I think I see this trend as worrying also for NGOs. And my recipe that I think is not going to be enough, but I try to approach it this way, is just like really speaking with people in person. And that means going to Ostrava and going to Karlovy Vary and talking with people about what they really think about just transition, for instance, and how they understand it and what they really need. And if it's somebody who is from ANO, who is from like Babiš party, then I can have a conversation with him. And actually I have seen that some of these people are really interesting. And this is something that when we only speak together like on the screens, we completely forget. And that's a lot of work that I think is also for journalists to make and for NGOs. That's the way I would go. Yeah.
No, I think it was very good points, and this black and white approach is actually wrongful in my view in every aspect, and everyone has to learn how to talk to people with different views and how we could actually discuss it in the regions and not to be stuck into some silos ourselves. So please, any last comments from Magda or Grzegorz or Istvan? Do you feel like having any final thought? Magda, please.
No, I have to say something ridiculous, yes, or something humorous at the end of the debate. So what we are going to wait in Slovakia, what is going to be seen in Slovakia? Please imagine Mr. Fico was as a young guy, 1988, a member of the Communist Party and a big internationalist. And then he was as a twice or three-time prime minister, a big Europeist. And now he is trying to play nationalist. So, but it's so funny because if he's trying to play a nationalist, it's a really funny. So not Hungary, but Slovakia will be a humorous camp in the Central Europe among the V4, for example, in the future. I think so.
No, that was a very nice evolution of Fico over the last 30 years, and you know, like, it shows also that these autocrats of today, they are very adaptable, right? And they learn from each other. That's the very essence of populism, that you are who your audience want you to be, right? That's the thing. Grzegorz, your last words, please. Some jokes as well, if you can.
No, that's very shortly. I think the Kaczynski evolution was very similar. I think, and for example, it manifests itself in a way that it was Kaczynski who put as one of the judge in the Constitutional Court the former communist prosecutor who was chasing oppositionists during the martial law. So during the most darkest time in 80s, and now he plays nationalist. Now he plays the defender of sovereignty and everything, and anti-communist. But he promotes, and this is not only one example from these 8 years. He promotes the former communists to the highest post in this state. So yeah, I mean, this is maybe something that is common unfortunately in our country.
Yes, yes. We have now not a Social Democratic Party, but we have a Slovak Social Democratic Party. It's fantastic.
Okay, so unfortunately, I think we lost a bit Istvan because he writes that he cannot hear the conversation. So let me conclude here and finish it. Thank you very much, our guests, Magda Vašáryová from Bratislava, Klára Votavová from Prague, Grzegorz Makowski from Warsaw, and Istvan Kollai. Actually, Istvan, you are in Bratislava or Budapest now? Okay, he doesn't hear now. Okay, but thank you so much for your conversation. Well, we hope that it's a part of the ongoing conversations around these issues. We believe that simply for Visegrad countries, that it's almost like 60 million people, right? Like, and we hope that we can actually be some force and not a farce, I would say, and then we can have some joint positions. We can play some role in European politics jointly, but of course we have to work on it, and it's our joint effort. Civil society also needs to be practical, smart, and strategic, so that it's actually playing its game well. And I believe this is something which we would like to open up and discuss more. So thank you all for joining us. Two practical things. We're gonna send you also like a little questionnaire that will ask you for feedback, because like it's also part of the project. So it will come up with the final email you will receive, and you will get also a link to the debate if someone wants to listen to it later or send it out. And we will update you with another sessions that we're gonna organize in foreseeable future in next month, because that's what we plan to do on similar issues around civil society, rule of law, and again cooperation in the region. So that's it. Thank you very much for your participation. Take care, and I hope see you in the foreseeable future, and sometimes also offline if possible. Okay, thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao.